Today I'm going to be talking about The One Thing, a book that claims to give you extraordinary results in life. Hi there, my name's Nick Lynch and welcome back to my channel. Today, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about The One Thing. So this is about applying a process to get extraordinary results in your life. The name of the book actually comes from a film from 1991 called City Slickers. So this is about where a group of businessmen from the city go to the West and decide to play at being cowboys. And they team up with this grizzled old mentor character called Curly, a bit of a babysitter, a bit of a guide who has to help them move some cattle from one side of the country to the other. It's probably a bit far, but one place to another. And when trying to impart some wisdom on the City Slickers, he says, do you want to know the secret to life? And the guy says, yeah. And he says, it's just one thing. And the guy says, your finger? He's like, no, just one thing. He's like, well, great, what's that? He's like, that's what you need to find out. Subsequently, in the second film, Curly's twin brothers turns up and says there's two things to life, whatever this is, and gold. But that's a story for another time. So anyway, this book is broken down into 4 parts, and I'm going to dive into those parts now, and hopefully we'll find some wisdom of our own. Can't believe I just said that. The first part that the book talks about is lies we've been told. So the author Gary Keller tells us about some ideas that may have been pushed forward or considered some common truths, which I'll go over now to explain, he goes over rather, to explain why these aren't true. So he touches on a lot of areas, but one being that multitasking is not ideal. The human brain is not designed for multitasking. We lose efficiency when we multitask. It's best to avoid it if possible. The other is that we have only so much willpower. You may have heard of this already, and it dips throughout the day. So the more energy that is taken from us throughout the day, the less willpower we have. He gives an example of a parole board and how they tend to give the most parole at the start of the day, and as the day goes on, they get tireder and they don't have the mental focus or willpower to weigh the evidence correctly or fairly. They default to no parole, and this jumps after a break and goes back down and jumps again after lunch, which is an interesting point. So that's why he recommends doing your big work, your one thing in the morning before you've lost all your willpower. They also talk about the idea of habits. So creating habits in themselves can be very helpful. You don't need to have discipline. You just need enough discipline to start a habit. So in the book it says about 66 days being the sweet spot for starting a habit. In other literature I've read, it can be 22 days, 30 days, but in this book it says 66 days, and to build one habit at a time. So once you're down the initial effort curve to a minimum amount of effort to sustain that habit, you can then go on to add more habits. They also talk about in the book that thinking big is bad, which strikes me as a little bit odd. I always was told thinking big was good, but maybe this is common knowledge that I'm not aware of. So thinking big, if you don't think big, you're limiting yourself. So if your trajectory is to a small goal, and you will only ever reach that small goal. If your trajectory is to 5-10 times what your small goal is, you have to think differently and acquire different skills in order to reach that goal. So even if you don't reach that goal, which hopefully you will acquire new skills and new techniques which you could then apply to other projects or other goals of a similar nature, which can be quite good for personal growth. So the next section goes on to talk about the truth, or which you could probably call the method or the main meat of the book. So this is the idea of having a focusing question, something that allows you to gain perspective in your life. So the question itself that is posed is, what is the one thing that I can do such that everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So this is based on a big picture question. So it might be a 10-year goal. What can I do in my life that makes everything else easier or unnecessary? And then once you've pinned that down, not an easy job in itself, but that's up to you to find that. And once you have found that, you can then ask the second question. So that's the acting big. Now the acting small question is, what is it that I can do that will make everything else easier or unnecessary right now? So you've got your big picture and you've got your small movement that happens to get to the big picture. So it then goes on to discussing Breaking that down, you can have your 10-year goal, your 5-year goal, yearly goal, monthly, weekly, daily, just to keep chipping away and getting you to that, that final goal. And the journey itself can lead to mastery in your particular task, which we'll go over in a moment. Also talks about the path to success. So this is the idea that there are 3 possibilities or solutions for taking action. So you can do what is doable to you, what is a bit of a stretch, and what is possible. So really successful people don't do what is comfortable to do. They don't do even what is a bit of a stretch, and within their abilities, they do what is possible. So it requires them to grow to be able to achieve the next step. So this is constantly level of growth allows you to achieve more over time. The next section, which builds on the previous, is getting exceptional results. So first they talk about finding your purpose. This is a bit nebulous and it's different for everyone, but basically pick a direction and start moving in it. So you can obviously change your purpose over time if it doesn't suit you or doesn't feel right. They say with time comes clarity. After that you have priority. So purpose without priority is powerless, it says in the book, which I think is nice. It doesn't roll off the tongue, but it's a good bit of advice. So if you have a goal that's far away, you need to have these little intermediate goals, which we talked about before. The further your goal is away in the future, the harder it is to get motivation in the moment to build towards achieving that goal. They did a little bit of research and found that if you offer someone the choice between $100 now or $200 in the future, you would imagine people would choose the $200 in the future, but they would most likely choose the $100 now, just because the brain is not very good at planning that far ahead. Third point in exceptional results is the idea of productivity. So you need to make productivity important, and they recommend blocking out 4 hours a day. Yes, you heard me, 4 hours a day. Seems like a lot, feels like a lot. And they recommend doing this at the beginning of the day when your willpower is still fresh, so you can get the most important thing done with the most amount of energy you have available. Make sure you're not interrupted, make sure there are no distractions, make sure you're in an environment that promotes good work ethic, so you don't get distracted by your phone, by phone calls from the office, by people walking into your room. They recommend booking a conference room if your office is accessible to other people so that you are not disturbed, which makes a lot of sense to me, and I think I'm going to try doing this if I can. Finally, in this part we have accountability. So this is making sure that you have agency, that you're in control of your life by taking feedback and assessing the situation and realizing that there's something you can do about it. Whereas if you take on the role of a victim, you blame everything on outside circumstances and don't take any action to get to your goals. Some people find having an accountability partner helpful, whether that's a mentor or a friend, so they can check how they're doing with this person. So it forces them to either have some social disappointment if they don't meet their targets they've set. So finally, this takes us to our last section, which is thieves. This is time stealers or things that don't add to our productivity. So first off is the inability to say no. So saying no allows you to focus on what is most important, which is your one thing. They say in the book, saying yes means you have to commit to saying 1,000 no's. So if you say yes to one thing, you have to say no a lot of times, which allows you to make the space to do that one thing that you're doing, which makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's quite a good rule that I hadn't really considered before. Secondly, we have fear of chaos. So this is an interesting thing I hadn't really considered. So if you focus the majority of your time on your one thing, it means you do that one thing, which leaves other things undone. So your environment may get messy, you may not take your cup out, you may not, things may get messy, you may not take your cup out to get washed, you may not move things around or be as kempt as you might, but this is just part of the process and it allows you to do extraordinary things. So I think it's a fair trade-off. Thirdly, we have poor health habits. So to do exceptional things, you need to have exceptional energy. So if you don't take care of yourself, that can really hinder this. So it's what you might imagine. It's getting enough sleep, it's eating healthily, and it's doing exercise. You want to be energized in the morning, so ideally do your exercise in the morning, which will give you the energy to fly through the rest of the day. If not the rest of the day, at least the first half of the day, which will contain your most important thing. Finally, we have point 4, which is the environment. So whether it's the physical environment you find yourself in, so if that's the area, the building, so you want something that supports you being productive. You know, I quite like being surrounded by plants, having natural light where possible, those kind of things. But also to avoid any distractions, to make myself not too accessible to people. It can be quite important. Also, the people themselves. So you want to surround yourself with people that build you up, people who are striving for success themselves, who want to be productive, not people who will sap your energy. And again, this is moving towards the idea of you are the 4 or maybe it's 5 people that you surround yourself with. So you take on their habits, you take on their understandings, you take on what's normal for them. So this can push you in one direction or another. So if you surround yourself by successful people, there's more chance that they will reinforce the habits that you are trying to foster in your own life. So that was the book, The One Thing. I found it quite a challenging read to get through. I had to read it a few times and start making notes for the pearls of wisdom to really become clear to me. But if you want to read it yourself, please do check it out on the link below. If you did read the book yourself, do leave a comment and let me know how you found it. Also, if you could like and subscribe, that would be great. And please feel free to check out some of my other videos which are on similar topics.